All right, we're all ready. Good evening, everyone. We're going to be learning tonight Maseches Shabbos Daf Kuf Lamed Vav, a relatively short blot, which, as I mentioned yesterday, when you're learning Rishonim, is terrifying because if you see how large the Tosfosim are there, and you look at the topics, it's all about Tumtum and Androgynous and some otherwise complicated topics. We'll be staying on the Gemara level, on the surface level, to try to get a little bit more of a tfisa on that as well. We're going to get started on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Hey, Amud Beis. 5 lines from the bottom, the Brisa there writes, Tanya, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kol sheshaha shloshim yom ba'adam eino nefel. Any child that lives for 30 days, they are no longer considered a nefel. And in fact, that's how we establish the din of pidyon haben. What's the obvious question that comes up? Bris milah. That'll be the question on the top of the next Amud. But this source from the Tanaim continues. Shene'emar, as the pasuk reads, Ufduyav mi ben chodesh tifdeh. Shmonas yamim bebehema, an animal that's born within 7 days until the 8th day is also, and once it hits the 8th day, eno nefel, but all the previous days is also nefel. Shene'emar, umiyom hashemini v'hala yeratzeh lekorban v'gomer. So haloshaha, if you don't wait long enough, if you don't wait to those thresholds, then sveka habe, it's a suffix nefel. We're not sure if that child is yet a viable life. We don't know. So then asks the Gemara top of Kuf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph an absolutely critical question. Why are we doing bris milah if the baby is a suffix nefel? Mimhal hechi mahalinanle. How can you possibly do bris milah? Machlokes Rashi Tosfos what the sukkah is here. We're just going to take a look at Rashi. Top Rashi the Ramaskal Mimhal hechi mahalinan shum katan. How could you do any bris b'yom hashmini b'Shabbos on Shabbos? Dilma nefelhu v'lo chazi lamu v'oseh chabura shelo l'shem mitzvah. Rashi's concern is a Hilchos Shabbos issue that if this baby is not roi to do bris milah and you do a bris, it's a chabura. You're not allowed to sound do a chabura. When the baby's not a nefel, he's a real baby, he's viable, so then the bris is perfectly kosher and we have all the psukim to support. But here, how do we know? We just said the baby's a suffix nefel. So answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Adabar Ahava, a name to remember, we'll come back to him tonight. And he says, Malan osam imanav shach. We are going to circumcise him no matter what. Im chai, if he's going to live, im chai hu shapir kamayil. Obviously, if he lives, if he ends up living, it'll be fine. And if he doesn't end up living, the imlav, then mechatech bebasar, then it says if you're just cutting flesh. Rashi adds in the word shchuta. It's as if you've cut basar shchuta. The animal is dead already. You cut a dead animal, it's basar shchuta. You're not cutting a live animal. Obviously, we're talking about a baby. You've got to be delicate with the language here. But if the baby does not live, then you have not done anything wrong. So he felt that even though it's true that there's a lumdus of suffix nefel, it's true that the baby may not be viable, but halachically speaking, as it relates to a bris, there's no nafkamina. Either he's going to live and it's a mitzvah, or he's not going to live and it's not an avera. So that's the answer that is given by Rav Adabar. But we saw in a brisa, suffix ben zayin, suffix ben ches. If there is a child who's born possibly in the 7th month, possibly in the 8th, and we highlighted yesterday that during the 8th month if a baby is born, he is assumed not viable. Yesterday we said it was ke'evan and he was muktzah. It's like wild ideas. A baby's born in the 8th month. There, what did we say? We said ein mechal and ulabes haShabbos. So why over here by suffix nefel do we say do a bris miman of shach, but by the suffix zayin, suffix ches we say don't do the bris ein mechalelin? Amai nim halei miman of shach. We should have had the same svar of Rabbi Bar Ava. What did he say? Im chayu shapir kamal. If he lives, then great. If he doesn't live, then mechatech babasar. All you're doing is cutting flesh of someone who's not alive, which is not usher. So why, by the case of suffix zayin, suffix ches, when a baby's born in month 8, or a suffix of zayin or ches, why then do we not do the bris? Answers the Gemara brilliantly. Amar mar berei Ravina ana the Rav Nechumi bar Zechariah targimna. I and Rav Nechumi bar Zechariah explained. Mimhal hachi nami mahalinale. It doesn't say over there you don't do a bris. It says ein mechalelin. What is that referring to? Lo nitzrucha ela lemachshirei mila be'alibad Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, who was our lenient shita in the very beginning of Perak Rabbi Eliezer, who said that all the machshirei mila were permissible, not only carrying on Yantiv and Shabbos, whatever, but even cutting down a tree in order to make the kol, in order to make the knife. Everything's mutter, not when it's a suffix ben zayin, suffix ben ches. But the bris itself would be mutter for the same svara of Avad Bar Abba. Therefore, when it comes to a case of a suffix nefel, which is every baby who's a suffix nefel, we'll see soon that that's not true, but that's our understanding right now, that every baby is a suffix nefel. So if there's a suffix nefel, or if the baby is a suffix ben zayin, suffix ben ches, we don't know if he's born in the 7th or 8th month. In both cases, mahalinanle, we do the bris because of the miman of shach of Rabbi Ravada bar Abba. 10 lines down, Kuf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Amar Abaye Ketanoim. What is this talking about? That there's a machlokes Tanoim. It says Rashi, 1.5 inches, 2 inches above where we are, Ketanoim. Nefel Gamor, says Rashi, Im chashuv kemes kedika amar Rav Ada bar Ava de'eno mechatech bebasar olo b'havya chabur. That is a machlokas. What Rav Ada bar Ava said on the top line, that if the baby's alive, then great, and if he's not alive, it's like cutting basar shchuta. That second phrase is subject to discussion kitanoi. If an animal dies on its own, the animal becomes an avela. That's the rest of the pasuk. If you look in the Torah or Shalim, if you have it, it says hanogeh b'niv lasa. When the animal dies on its own, it becomes an avela. So then, what is this pasuk coming to teach us? Lahavi, to include ben shmona, an animal born in the 8th month, she'ein shchitaso mitaharaso, that if he's born at that time, the animal is considered a treifa, because he's born in a month where we assume he's a treifa, and be'ein shchitaso mitaharaso. But even if they do a shchita, the animal's still going to be an avela. I might have thought that the shchita would have removed the status of nevela, the status of tumas nevela. That's not the case according to the Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Omrim shchitaso mitaharaso. It's not true. The animal is a treifa, but the shchita removes the problem of nevela. My lab, the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi arguing about the following: the marsavar chayhu, marsavar mesu. Maybe they're talking about the fact that one holds that the animal really is alive, and therefore the shchita is moil. The shchita helps to remove the status of nevela. Umar savar mesu, and one holds that the animal is already dead, so it already will earn the status of nevela, irrelevant of the status of shchita, and therefore that would be a problem for Rav Ada bar Ava, because we see that there's a machlokes about cutting an animal that's halachically dead, right? Rav Ada bar Ava was very simple about it. But here we see this machlokes tanaim that that's not the case. There's a machlokes about it. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rava, no, that can't be the pshat in the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Amar Rava, Yachi, if that's true, if according to some you're saying that the animal might actually be tahor, maybe it should be mutter to eat. If the shchita works for the nevela, maybe it also works to make the animal kosher. Ella, therefore the Gemara pivots and goes in another direction. The kule alma mesu. Everyone agrees that the animal is a mace, and Rav Ada bar Ava's shita on the top of Yamud is supported. The Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Sabre, ketreifa. The animal's like a treifa. Treifa lav afal gav de mesahi shchitasa mitaharasa. Just like by a treifa, if you do shchita, it will keep the animal tahor, namely from becoming an avela. Hachanami loshna. Here too, in the case of an animal that's born in the 8th month, we would assume no different, that the animal can remove its status of nevela just by having the shchita. The Rabbanan, lo dami l'treifa. The Rabbanan say that an animal that's born in the 8th month is not similar to a treifa. Treifa, haisa la shas hakosher. At least by a treifa, there was most of its life when it was eligible to be shechted normally. It became a treifa when it was older. But in this case of an animal that's born in the 8th month, lo haisa la shas hakosher, it was never shaykh to be kosher, and therefore the shchita does not help at all. The chitema treifa mi beten. Maybe you would have argued that the animal is treifa mi beten. Let's say that an animal is born with a treifa. It was punctured in the gut before it was ever born. Its whole life is treifa, and therefore it was treifa mi beten. Ma'ikal memer. What would you say? Hasam yesh b'mina shchita. Still, by that type of animal, let's call it a cow. By that type of animal that has a treifa, at least in general, it's an animal that's shaykh to be shechted, a shaykh to be kosher. But hacha, by a baby that's born in the 8th month, or in this particular month of gestation, we never ever shech those animals, and therefore that is the shita of the Rabbanan. And up until now, we have now supported the shita of Rav Ada bar Ava. We are just about halfway down, a little bit more actually than halfway down. Kuf Lamed Vav Amid Aleph. Let us continue. The Gemara asks a question. Mipligi Rabbanan. Do the rabbis argue? Alei de Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Olo. If you'll just keep a finger here, look back on the previous Amud. We started with the sheets of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who said that 30 days is the status of safety, is the status of dropping the status of mayfel for a birth, or 8 days for an animal. We subsequently saw in the Gemara 8 months in gestation for an animal as well. So first of all, is there a dissenting opinion on Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? Do the Rabbanan argue with him? And if they do, in Tim Tzalomar Pligi, and even if you want to say that they do argue on the sheet of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, halacha kamos and halacha kamos. Who do we paskin like? Would we paskin like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, or would we paskin like the Rabbanan? It says the Gemara a couple of attempts. Tashma, egel shenolad b'yom tov, shochten oso b'yom tov. If an egel, if this animal is born on Yom Tov, you can shech the day of. What rule is this breaking? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Because what did he say? 8 days. And if it's not 8 days, so then the animal should not be kosher. So we see from here the fact that the animal can be shechted the same day. We therefore see a shita that is against Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, implying that the Rabbanan don't argue with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. What does this Gemara mean? Answers the Gemara, the Kimle Bigave, what it's talking about, the Kimle Bigave, we know about this animal, Shekalu Lo Chadashav, that this animal was full term. When an animal is full term, these rules of 30 days and 8 days for the baby and animal respectively don't apply. So therefore, our whole question about bris milah falls away to start with, even though we answered it with a memanavshach, but it doesn't make a difference. If the baby's full term, then the question falls away. Because here, even Rav Shimon ben Gamliel would agree, because it's kalul lo chadashav, because the baby was full term, so therefore, we're not concerned about the 8-day mark of that animal. Tashma, in regards to a bechor, the shavin, all of the shitas agree, she'inolad hu umumo imo, that if this animal is born with its mum, we know it can't be brought for certain korbanos at this point. Shezeh mina muchan, if this animal is born in this way, it's mina muchan, it can be shechted right away. Again, seemingly violating what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel set up to be the 8-day standard. Here we're allowed to do shechita right away. The haraya that the Rabbanan are arguing against the sheet of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, answers the Gemara the same answer as before. No, here we know that this animal was full term. Tashma, let's try again. Damar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Tashma is normally a reference to Tanaim. Here we see that it's a reference to Amoraim, a little bit unique. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel says, Halacha ki Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. That's pretty clear. When you say that there is a halacha like someone, it strongly implies that there is another shita, halacha mechlal depligi. Now, if Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel was going to give a shir, when Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel gave a shir, he said, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The Talmidim must have said back, who was arguing with him? The Rabbanan were arguing. Halacha mechlal depligi. If Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel was going to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, it implies that there was an argument, shma mina, and therefore it is the case that there was a machlokas, but we pass on like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, namely that we are concerned about the 30-day mark for a baby, which is why Pejana Ben is when it is, and we are concerned as well about the 8-day mark for an animal, and that din would apply as well, with the exceptions of kalul lo chadashav, that if the baby went to full term. Amar Abaye, nafal min hagag o achlo aryeh. Terrible case scenarios. If a baby fell off of a roof or was killed by an animal, divrei hakol chayhu, everyone treats that animal as a chai. We'll see what this is talking about. I mean, that animal, until it died, of course, was treated as an animal that was a chai, not a nefel. Remember, we said that a baby up until 30 days could be a nefel. What if the animal dies of unnatural causes? There's an intervention, right? It's not like they died of medical issues, as we'll see soon. This animal died from external issues. So a nefel is a baby that's assumed to not make it. It's a baby that won't survive. Literally, it actually means a miscarriage in halachic terminology, but here it's being used to say that the baby will not survive. So, divrei hakol chayhu, ki pligi, where would the argument be, says Abaye, shepihek umes, where there was some yawning and then the baby died. Not specifically and limited to yawning, but activities that kind of like, they were like a little abnormal, medically speaking, that then subsequently led to the death. Mar Savar, one opinion held chayhu, that the animal is considered to have lived a regular life until its death. Umar Savar Mesu, that it was considered to have been dead even when it was alive. What is all of this talking about? L'may nafkamina. The baby passed away. Why are we even talking about this? So says the Gemara, a critical nafkamina, it's not so halacha l'maysa today, liftor min hayibum. We know that if there are two brothers and one of the brothers is married and there's a death without a baby, so then the other brother can marry that woman and they can do yibum. But what if she had a baby that was a nefel? What if the baby lived 25 days and died? Well, it depends how he died. If he died by falling off of the roof, so then that was a chai. That baby was a real chai. We don't assume he's a nefel. But if in fact that baby died because the pihek case where there were medical issues, then that baby was a nefel, and then there's a mitzvah of yibum and chalitza. So we do have chalitza nowadays. That we do. We have the shoes and bezdin. The shoes made in a very special way. So that's the nafkamina. That's what all of these cases are being mefalpel about what. How do we look at that baby during that time? If he died of external causes, the baby's a chai, in which case there's no yibum. And if the baby died of medical issues, then the baby was a mace even when it was alive, and therefore there is yibum. So it says the Gemara, that's what the nafkamina is, liftar mina yibum, 3/4 of the way down, kuf lamed vav amid aleph. Let's continue. Nafal min hagago achlo ari divrei hakol chayhu. Are you sure? You said that when the death was because of external issues, the baby fell off of a gag or it was killed by an animal. You said that that's divrei hakol chay. Not true. Says the Gemara, the Harav Papa Rav Huna Berei Rav Yoshua Iklu Lebei Berei to Rav Idi Bar Oven. They went to the home of Rav Idi Bar Oven. The Abi Lahu Igla Tilsa, they made him an animal. We learned about Igla Tilsa, either a third born animal or a third of an animal. The Amama de Shiva, toward its seventh day. The Amrele, they said to him, Israchisu le ad laorta. If you wait until the night of the 8th, who achlinan mine, then we can eat it. Hashta, but now that you want to shecht it on the 7th day, lo achlinan mine. What do we see? We see that this animal is dying by shchita. It's not dying because of medical issues. Yet we still say we treat it as a nefel until day 8. What does that mean? It means that you can't say that divrei hakol, that when a baby falls off of that roof or gets killed by an animal, it's not divrei hakol, because we have a shita here that has to wait till day 8. The baby's a nefel until otherwise noted. Answers the Gemara. 2 lines, last of the thin lines. Elak shapiek umeis divrei hakol meis. Really, what does everyone agree to? That when there were medical issues, that's when we say that everyone agrees that the baby was a mace. Kipligi, when is there a machlokes? Benafal min agag ve'achlo ari. In that case, where there were external influences on the death of the baby, mar savar mesu or mar savar chayhu. The most practical nafkamin of all of this is cases like, God forbid, like a SIDS death, sudden infant death syndrome, where like it's not really external. There must be something wrong. So if that baby's within 30 days, then there might be a real mitzvah d'oraisa of chalitza on the wife of that baby. If the husband dies, and it's a terrible scenario. A lot of people had to die for this to come about. It's a terrible scenario. But that's when Yibum and Chalitza would come about. First of the longest lines. Berei de Rav Dimi bar Yosef isili leahu yunuka, he had a baby. And the goats lasin yomin shachiv. Nebuch, unfortunately, within the first 30 days of life, the baby passed away. Yosef kamis abel ilave, and he started to sit shiva. Says the Gemara, Amar le avuha, his father, the grandfather of the baby, said to him, Tzavarunisa kabayis lamechal. You're eating the sudas havra. You're eating this meal of mourners. You don't have to mourn. The baby's a nefel. There's no shiva in such a case. Amarle kin libei shekalu lo chadashav. I know he wasn't a nefel because kalu lo chadashav, the baby was at full term. In which case we don't assume that the baby is a nefel. Rav Ashi ikla lebei Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi went to the home of Rav Kahana. Isra bei Milsa. Another terrible thing happened. Begot Slas and Yoman, that a baby died within 30 days. Chazi the Yosef becomes Abel Ilabei. There too he saw that he was sitting shiva. 3 lines from the bottom. Amarle lo savar lamar lahada Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel halacha. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, don't you hold like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that a baby is a nefel during the first 30 days unless otherwise noted? Same answer as before. 4th time today we're seeing this. Amarle kimli begave. I know that this baby was in his gestational period shekalu lo chadashav, that he was a full-term baby. Itmar meis. This is another case scenario. Meis besoch shloshim ve'amda v'niskacha. Let's say that a woman had a baby, her husband died, and then the baby died. And there's a difficult girsa here. Rashi here corrects the girsa 2 lines from the bottom. Meis Havlad Bisoch Lamed, and that word Bisoch has a girsa change. Bisof Lamed at the end of 30 days. So if at the end of 30 days the baby died, she made an error and she got married without having done the mitzvah of Chalitza or Yibum. Really, she needed to do that, but she thought in her head the baby was a nefel. So she just got married. She thought the baby was a chai. She thought the baby was a chai baby and not a nefel. If it was a nefel, then of course there's going to be. So she thought the baby was a chai, and she was wrong. When he scotched and she got married. So Amar Ravina, what's that? The case scenario is where a woman got married and had a baby, and the baby died on day 30, and she thought that the baby should be treated as what? And her husband died also. Right. So awful scenario to start with. And then she thought that the baby was considered a chai, that she had a leda. And if she had a leda, then there's no mitzvah for her husband who has passed away, for that brother to do yibum or chalisa. So she got married to somebody else. Guy, whatever, second husband, not the brother, right? Married somebody else. And then we came to pass that she realized the baby was taka nefel. And if the baby is a nefel, that's a big problem, because then you're not allowed to just skip on this mitzvah d'oraisa. So Amar Ravina Mishmei de Rava, turning to the top of Kufla Mevav and Beis, Im Eishes Yisrael Hi Choletzes. If in fact she married a Yisrael for the second husband, then they just do chalitza, because there's no problem with her to kind of divorce from the Yisrael and remarry that husband. The problem is by a Kohen, where you're not allowed, a Kohen can't marry a Grusha. So if in fact, and that's the next case, Im Eishes Kohen Hi Eina Choletzes. Ravina was makel to say that by an Eishes Kohen that there's no need for them to get divorced, because it's not. It's a bit of a suffix. We're not totally sure why. So that's a sheet of Ravina. And the Gemara doesn't like this. For Rav Shravya, Mishmei de Rava Amar, Achazu v'achazu choletzas. I'm sorry, the second marriage is over too. You have to do chalitza. I don't care that he's a Kohen. She shouldn't have gotten married. It was an accident. She shouldn't have gotten married. So says the Gemara, Amar Le said back, no. Amar Le Ravina Rav Shravya, you made a mistake because the Urta at night, Amar Rava taught the din, Hachi, he taught it the way that you said it, but in the morning he changed it back. But Safra Hadarbe, to say that they don't have to do the chalitza by a Kohen. Amar Le, Sharisuha, he changed his mind to say that it's mutter for her to stay married to the Kohen. Yehei Rava desishu sarba, does he also want to make all of the chaylev mutter to eat? That's a big kula. All of a sudden this is mutter. That's not right. But Rava's Rava, and Talmidim disagreed. Rav Yehuda Matter, the case of androgynous, let's learn a little bit about that before we wrap up for the night at the Mishnah on the top of the next Amud. Amar of Shezvi, Amar of Chiza, Lo la kol Amar Rav Yehuda androgynous. Remember we said in the Mishnah, there are according to Rav Yehuda, an androgynous who has both male and female anatomies, that the baby still gets a bris. So the Gemara qualifies, this baby is not a zachar l'chol davar. Let's see what he's not a zachar for. She'ima ta'omer came be'erchen ya'aroch. Let's say that a person said, I want to donate the amount of money that this androgynous is worth. Right? We have this ha'aracha to be aroch. So the Torah says, how do we know that this person doesn't have a value as it relates to dollar amounts, that there's no coded value for them? Not to be misconstrued as they don't have value, but there's no financial transfer within this language of Torah. Titania, because the Brisa writes, Hazachar v'lo tumtum v'androgynous. Fine. So it's not a male, but maybe the androgynous is treated as a female. Yachol lo yehei be'erach ish. Aval yehei be'erach isha. Maybe he's treated like a female as it relates to ha'aracha. Says Gemara, Talmud Omar hazachar and be'im nekebahi. Zachar ba'adai nekeba v'adais. V'lo tumtum v'androgynous. So we see here that as it relates to androgynous, when Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that the baby is chayiv to have a bris, that doesn't mean he's a zachar l'chol davar. He's not a zachar as it relates to the halachos of Ya'aroch, of ha'aracha. It's just not the case. And the stam sifra Rabbi Yehuda. Whenever we talk about the sifra, a stam sifra is like Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda is our Mishnah, same person. The haraya, the fact that over there we see by the androgynous that he doesn't have the ha'aracha of a male or a female, and therefore he's not a zachar mamish, we therefore see that Rabbi Yehuda does not say that an androgynous is a zachar l'chol davar. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Afana nami tanina. I didn't even need you for this. I've already learned this already. Akol ksherim lekadesh chutz mechershot v'katan. This lekadesh here, take a look at Rashi's second line. Dibur Mascha lekadesh mechatas laseis efer al hamayim. Who's allowed to add the ashes of the para aduma to the water to make the may para? Who's allowed to do that? So says the Gemara. Everyone is allowed to chutz mechershot v'katan. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. He does allow the katan to add in the ashes. However, uposel be'isha uve androgynous, and he excludes an androgynous there as well because it's not a zachar, shma mina, and therefore we see that umay shnamila. Okay, so fine. If you're saying that many other areas are not shayach by an androgynous to be a zachar, why by bris mila did you say he's chayv in a mila? Granted, he has an aver, but he's not a zachar by ha'aracha. He's not a zachar by mechatas. So why over here by bris mila? Answers the Gemara, because mishum dechsiv imolachem kol zachar. Pashut. He's a male. He has the male anatomy, so therefore we do the bris. Have a beautiful night. Hashem will pick up tomorrow night.